Join us for part 1 of our COVID vaccine series.
Hello, and welcome to Health and Fitness Redefined. I'm your host, Anthony Amen. Join me today as we take a dive into the world of health and fitness, where we learn to overcome adversity, to pick back versus fiction, and see health and fitness in a whole new light. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a hot topic, one for the press. I am super excited to have this gentleman on my show. He goes by Dr. Bob. Some might know him as Dr. Robert Lahita. He is a immunologist, and I don't want to give it all away, but welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anthony. It's good to be here.
I'm pumped, man. We're going to talk about your immune system and all that fun stuff, but I want you to take us back first. Why did you decide to get into this field?
Well, this was a field that I got into by accident. What happened was when I was in medical school, I decided to go for a PhD in microbiology. And the reason for that was that I had been working at Merck, the pharmaceutical company, in the summers. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting area. So I went and got a PhD in addition to my MD, which was not probably a bright idea at the time because it was a heck of a lot of work. And anyhow, it worked out okay. After 6 years, I got both degrees, went to New York Cornell at the time. Now it's New York Presbyterian. And at that time, I said, I have a degree in microbiology, but I don't know anything about immunology. So I said to my boss, can I take an elective for a couple of weeks in immunology? And he said, well, you have a choice. You can either go to Sloan Kettering across the street, which was a good place to go, or Rockefeller University, which is right next door. So I went across the street. It wasn't such a great place for me to work. And then I went over to Rockefeller and I was really impressed. Everybody remembers reading the book Arrowsmith, written by Sinclair Lewis, about the McGurk Institute, which was, in fact, patterned after the Rockefeller University or Rockefeller Institute at that time. It was a phenomenal experience, and I wound up spending 3 weeks in an elective and 12 years after I left my residency, 12 years, and I really studied immunology at great length. And I said to my boss, he said, what do you want to do with your life? I said, I'm going to be an immunologist. He says, well, you're going to be broke. He said, because nobody pays immunologists anything. He said, you got to become a rheumatologist, immunologist. And so that's what happened. And that's how I got into this field.
That's a story, man. Something you didn't want to do and kind of bounced into it.
Yeah.
It's funny how things happen by like happenstance.
That's right. By chance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you get into the field. Do you immediately jump into your own practice, or do you start working for a company?
No. I lived at the Rockefeller University. I lived in the apartment building, and I now had 2 children and a wife. And I moved out of the house staff building, which was the building that all the residents and interns lived at New York Presbyterian Hospital. It's still there, by the way, on the east side of Manhattan. And I moved down the street to 63rd and York to the Rockefeller subsidized housing. And I literally went across the street to my lab every day. And I was doing research, basic lab research. And also I was then spending time in the Rockefeller Research Hospital. I became the program director for the hospital, which means sort of like being the chief resident, the chief young doctor. I wasn't a professor because, as you may know, professors at Rockefeller are very heralded and very, it's the Nobel factory. Everybody there is either getting one or is en route to getting one. So it was a little bit intimidating, but being there for all the years I was there, I went from being a lowly instructor to an associate professor and then left. I left after my boss he died of a heart attack. I should say dropped dead, but he died of a heart attack. And at Rockefeller, you don't stay on after your lab head disappears. So I left, and then I went to the Hospital for Special Surgery, where I already had an affiliation to study arthritis and immunologic diseases. And then I wound up going across town to the west side to become the chief of rheumatology at St. Luke's Roosevelt Hospital, which was part of Columbia University. So I made my rounds in New York City to all the big institutions. It was a lot of fun. Got to see a lot of people.
That's exciting, man. You kind of just bounced around a little bit. And
Yes.
I don't know about you, because I want to actually ask immunologists. I feel like everyone is nowadays.
Yes,
Your brother, your sister, your friend.
everybody knows more about immunology today than even during the HIV crisis, where I thought people were really boning up on immunology. But now they really are boning up, and they're really pretty good at it. They read about it every day. And it's important to understand immunology if you're going to be comfortable with the vaccines and protecting your body.
Yeah, which is very interesting. I don't want to jump into that yet, but I want to talk about basic immunology. So, what is the basis of our immune systems? How does it function? How do we keep it at a higher functioning level? Just certain things that probably are very common questions you used to get all the time.
Okay, so the title of my book is Immunity Strong, but the original title of the book was The Biological Soul, because that really is what the immune system is. And when you look at all of medicine, everything, or like you remember the old saying, all roads lead to Rome. Well, all roads in your body lead to the immune system, from your brain to your big toe. The immune system is the policing agency of your body. And that I start off in the book with the first or second chapter talking about comparing your immune system to a large metropolis. In fact, it's so similar, it's scary, because within the metropolis, which we call your body, and all of your listeners or viewers are now going to say, oh, let me touch my arm. And you're right, your arm is part of your immune system. Your brain is a major part of your immune system. And the immune system functions at a very, very high level. It functions to protect you constantly without your even knowing it. It has imperceptible reactions that go on every millisecond of the day. And when your immune system craps out or is destroyed or is weakened by an infection, by a toxin, by drinking too much alcohol, using drugs, that biological soul begins to dysfunction. It really doesn't work up to par. So you see that in a large city, you have police, you have patrol officers, you have detectives, you have special forces, you have border patrol, you have all sorts of things, all analogous to parts of your immune system. The lymph nodes I call the precincts of the body, the police precincts. I even actually called the spleen Rikers Island at one point, but I prefer to call it like a mini prison, because the spleen actually captures the antigens. Take COVID. COVID can be dragged away by white cells and deposited in the spleen, and this process goes on constantly. There are two parts of the immune system, something we call the innate immune system, which I talk to medical students about almost every so many weeks. And then we have the adaptive immune system. And it's important for people to know what this is all about. The innate immune system, if you step on a large piece of glass and you have the glass go into your foot, it may be covered with germs. Your innate immune system reacts within milliseconds to attack that piece of glass, to try to control the inflammation around the piece of glass. The inflammation is actually a good thing. So your foot may turn bright red. It may hurt like the dickens. It may get swollen. You may run a slight fever, but your immune system is now called upon with innate immunity to react to this severe injury. Now, this may not be a severe injury to most of your viewers, because what's a piece of glass or a thumbtack in your foot? But imagine when you're in a motor vehicle accident and you fracture both legs and rip open part of your stomach. Now you've got the immune system going really bonkers. It is going into warp speed mode, for want of a better term. And then 3 days after that, the adaptive immune system comes along. And that's where all the T cells and B cells are involved. I like to call these the detectives and the patrol officers of the immune system. They come down and they get a lot of information. Your genetics predisposes you to responding to certain germs and viruses. You've inherited this from ancestors thousands of years ago, relatives. And so your immune system may react robustly, or it may be slow, or it may be weak. We simply don't know. But we've known now with COVID infection that everybody's immune system is different and reacts differently. So you have the innate system, which is the rapid responders. Then you have the adaptive system where memory is established, literally memory, recognition of the antigen. So if on the piece of glass is a streptococcus, which is the name of a bacterium, your immune system recognizes the cell wall. It recognizes the structure of the streptococcus. It knows that that streptococcus is now a foreign invader. And if you ever get that streptococcus in your body again, say a year, 2 years, 3 years from now, the response will be far more efficient because the criminal has a record in your genome, in your immune system. It knows that that is a foreign participant. So, the immune system says, be on the lookout, or in police parlance, BOLO, be on the lookout for a streptococcus, which may be entering your bowel. It may be coming in, or you may have breathed in some strep in your lung. And those of you who have weakened immune systems can get streptococcal pneumonia, which is quite common. But not everybody gets strep pneumonia, only certain people, maybe because you don't have antigenic recognition. And by the way, antigens mean foreign substances, and antibodies are those proteins that you hear about, which are actually the arresting officers of the immune system. The antibodies are important. And we hear now in the news every day about neutralizing antibody. Neutralizing antibody is exactly that. The antibody comes along and it neutralizes the crook. How does it do that? It surrounds the crook, it puts handcuffs on the bacterium or the virus, and carts it off in a white cell to the spleen.
And
So
then the name is Rutgers Island, so
That's right.
it's never coming out.
It's not as defective of the actual Rikers Island. The spleen happens to be far more efficient and is staffed with a lot of very, very healthy cells that take care of criminals. It fragments them and digests them. So it's a good deal. So that's really the basic premise of how the immune system works. I describe this in the book in great detail. And when you get finished reading these chapters on the structure of the immune system and what's what, you'll understand it perfectly. Now, obviously, this is the main highway of the body that I'm talking about. There are little tributaries or side streets with regard to the immune system that you can go down. Natural killer cells, interferon, which is an antiviral substance. We're hearing about that every day because some people don't have interferon. And if you don't have interferon, you can have a viral infection that can be extremely deadly very quickly. And of course, vaccines, which are ways of boosting this police department, giving it reinforcements, making it react even more efficiently than natural. And that's what people have to understand about vaccines. It's not deadly to get a vaccine. If you get a little sick after the vaccine, it simply means your innate immune system and likely your adaptive immune system several days later are priming to efficiency. I get a lot of people who get vaccinated, for example, and get joint pain or get new antibodies to substances they never had antibodies to before. Remember, the antibodies are proteins that are directed against antigens.
A good example is when I get the flu shot.
Yes.
I know it's not the flu, but
Right.
I do have a reaction every
Yes,
day.
you get aches and pains. You may run a slight fever. You may wind up in bed for 3 days. That's par for the course. That's literally par for the course, to use the golf terminology.
Yeah, it's pretty much inevitable. And then
Yes.
I have my luck is I get the flu shot and then get the flu because the strain of flu shot I got wasn't the strain of flu that was active and the one that I ended up with.
Yeah, well, that's another big deal. We can talk about vaccines right now, if it's okay, Anthony, that vaccines are tailored to the antigen or the foreign substance. So, for example, we've been giving flu shots for years. I used to go on TV and talk about flu 10, 15 years ago because every year there are different types of flu. Influenza has these antigens on their surface that change, hemagglutinins and neuraminidase. These are all technical terms for the way the flu presents. But, H1N1 stands for that. So you have to have a specific vaccine that causes your immune system to recognize this new foreign virus. Now, most people have a certain amount of immunity to flu in general, but specific immunity is what we're looking for. And the immune system is very, very specific when it is given the right information. Same thing with COVID. COVID, we had the alpha strain, the beta strain, now we have the delta strain, which happens to really be an altered antigen and causes an altered immune response because the spike protein is not the same as the one that was produced by the alpha variant. And viruses are very smart. These are the criminals. We're talking about criminals now. And criminals, I have a whole chapter on criminals, the various bacteria, the fungi, the viruses. But COVID is basically a criminal, and it gets in there, and viruses are not alive, but you could have fooled me. They get in the body and they mutate very readily when they're persistently in a group of people, and these people are not immunologically protected. And remember, your genetics determine how you're going to respond to something like both the flu virus or the COVID virus. You're going to respond by virtue of the fact that you have an innate immune system that works, you have an adaptive immune system that works, and you don't have any deficiencies or deficits or defects in your immune system. Now, what would produce a defect? Chronic lung disease, heart failure, diabetes, asthma. These are all things which we call comorbidities. Morbid means sick, sicknesses, essentially. So if you've got comorbidities, all the more reason to get immunized. Now, if you've had these 2 shots, let's say the messenger RNA, and we can talk about that mechanism in a second, but if you had the 2 shots, we're offering a booster shot. Why? Because scientists in other countries like Israel, and indeed in this country, have realized that the neutralizing antibody wanes. What they don't measure is cellular immunity. That's the adaptive immune response. The programmed nature of the cells that are within your body that know that this is a criminal or not a criminal. Self versus non-self. That's
what about you talking about, I know it's like the biggest hot topic right now and it's hard to get a grasp of COVID only because it's new. I mean, in virus world, it's brand new. So somebody that's had COVID and therefore has that natural immunity to it.
Yes.
I know they just pushed out this weekend stating that natural immunity can last at least a year. So is there a difference between somebody that had it versus somebody that got the vaccine if both of these are the same type of comorbidities and the same type of functioning immune system? Because I know that does play a role.
Good question. Now, it depends on the person. I'll give you an example. During the hot time of 2020 in the spring and in the summer, I was dressed in scrubs with personal protective equipment. I wore an orange hat. I mean, I had masks, goggles, the whole works. I would send people who were infected, who recovered, to try to collect convalescent sera from them. That means taking their blood out, getting rid of the white cells and the red cells, and just using the plasma, which has the antibodies in it. About 100 people I sent to the Red Cross to be bled for convalescent sera. And of those 100, only about 20 had a good antibody titer that could be reinfused into somebody else to protect them. Now, of course, a year and a half later, we have monoclonals, which we can create in the laboratory. But at that time, we had nothing to offer except somebody else's sera, somebody else's antibody. But the point I'm making is that everybody reacts differently. If you have a natural infection, you're very well protected. Your cellular immunity, your adaptive immune response, and your innate immune response have been really challenged. And you recovered. You didn't die, which means that your immunity against COVID is pretty darn good. Depends on which COVID you had. But it still is pretty darn good, even against the variants. And that's why I'm not so upset about people who have been infected already getting vaccinated. Although we do recommend it for the very reason I just mentioned, that maybe 15 out of 100 people have strong amounts of antibody and the rest of people have varying amounts of antibody that we couldn't even use to treat other people. So everybody's immune system is different. Everybody's immune system relies on your relatives, your grandparents, your great aunt who might have been in the 1918 flu pandemic. They might have been in Europe and went through a typhoid, challenge. They may have been in Finland or something, and so you get my idea is that everybody is different, and that's the important thing. So the vaccine sort of levels everybody. It makes sure that regardless of how you handle the infection or whether you didn't have the infection and could die from it, when you get the vaccine, you're now leveled and you're in the even playing field.
So there's a lot of information that you hear from this doctor, this expert, that expert, and everyone's saying the exact opposite thing of each other.
I know.
You can totally agree on that.
Yeah, I know.
So
And
someone I've heard, and I want you to kind of explain this, that if you had COVID, you have natural immunity, you're of a younger age,
yeah,
that the vaccine can actually make your immunity less because it's not as powerful as the natural immunity was.
no.
Is this truth? So
That's not true. What the vaccine does, it boosts your natural immunity. What it does is it provides you with extra. That's why we get the booster shot. We boost your immunity. In fact, the title of my book is Immunity Strong: How to Boost Your Immune System and Live Beyond 100. If you do everything I tell you to do, you should be able to do that. But I'm serious that the vaccine is important to boost your immune system. It is not detrimental to your immune system or to you, even though after you get vaccinated, and I tell this to the patients that I see with post-COVID syndrome and all that, even after you're vaccinated, you may feel sick. You may have a rash. You may have a fever. You may feel like, I'm going to be in bed for a week. That's okay. That means your immune system is primed. Now, we have to get into the subject that is really very, very hot, and that is cytokines and chemokines. Now, your viewers and you may never have heard of those. Those are
I have, but I want you to simplify it because I know a lot of people haven't.
So let's go back to the police department. Okay, how do these guys communicate? There got to be ways to communicate. The cell in your big toe has got to communicate with the cell in your tonsil, and it does so vis-a-vis cytokines. Your brain has to communicate with Rikers Island, your spleen. Your brain has to communicate with the lymph nodes in your groin. So if you have a sexually transmitted disease, your brain now knows you've got the clap, or you have syphilis, or worse. So the cytokines and the chemokines, the cytokines are these chemicals that are communication molecules. There are about 250 of them now. And we use these cytokines to treat diseases. We inhibit the cytokines or we promote the cytokines to treat diseases. So these are very important molecules. The other molecules are called chemokines, and those are the molecules that tell the cells where to go. These basically are transit communication molecules that if I get a chemokine from the inflammation in your big toe, and I say to your brain or to your thymus gland or to your thyroid, we need cells, we need white cells down in the toe region, and that's what happens. The cells go down there and they help combat the infectious process that may be going on in your big toe. Say you have gout. Gout is crystals within cells wreaking havoc, causing inflammation. Not terribly damaging, except gouty arthritis can be damaging, but it can be very, very painful, very, very painful. And so the immune response, the inflammatory response is very, very important. And that's all mediated through cytokines and chemokines. So cytokines and chemokines are my communication molecules. I talk about that in the book in a very easy way to understand. But we use, and those of your readers, or not your readers, your listeners and viewers who have arthritis will understand that we use these cytokine inhibitors to treat their disease. And believe me, if I give a shot to somebody with rheumatoid arthritis who can't move, they're stiff, I'm in such pain, I give them a shot of a tumor necrosis factor, that's the name of a cytokine, tumor necrosis factor inhibitor, very common, you all know it, Humira, Enbrel, Orencia, all these drugs that the doctors use are all cytokine inhibitors. And that means that it blocks the cytokine. It blocks parts of the immune system, takes away the pain, makes you feel like $1 million. I've had patients run the marathon because I've inhibited their cytokines. These are people who couldn't walk for 2 weeks. And all of a sudden I give them a cytokine inhibitor and they're climbing stairs like, 13-year-olds. And so it's really, the immune system is miraculous. There's no getting around it. It really is the biological soul. And you need to understand it to feel safe and to know what to do and not be afraid of the vaccines.
Yeah, I have so many questions. I know.
That's what happens every time I open my mouth. People ask me hundreds of questions. We can go on all night.
Yeah, fair enough. I want to stick to the COVID before I kind of move on to some other topics. I have so many things about the immune system. And I've flat out question I hear all the time. I personally have read in the FDA approval for the Pfizer vaccine, you scroll down about, I think it's 8 paragraphs, you'll see something where it says men between the ages, under the age of 30, are way more likely to have severe side effects from the vaccine, that including strokes. This isn't something that's now being publicized that it is causing strokes. Is this specific to the mRNA vaccine? Is this something most vaccines end up doing? And is there a risk-reward factor for getting it, where if you had somebody who's 20 years old, healthy, has no comorbidities, has a 0.0001% chance of dying of COVID, might also have a 0.0001% chance of now having a stroke because of vaccine? Is it worth getting?
Well, number one, it is worth getting. Number two, there are side effects to everything we prescribe and everything you take. And these side effects can be from a simple aspirin. They can be from a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug like Advil. They can be from digitalis if you've got heart disease, et cetera, et cetera. So there are side effects. Everything in medicine is a trade-off. I tell the medical students that. I tell my medical residents that. No matter what you take, there's a trade-off. Now, with regard to strokes, yes, men do react worse. Actually, men who get infected react worse than females who get infected with the natural virus. But with regard to side effects of the vaccine, very, very, very rarely, and this occurred with the J&J vaccine, you may remember, young men getting inflammation of the heart called myocarditis, or pericarditis, the covering of the heart being inflamed. It's treatable, it's curable, just like strokes are treatable and curable. With the J&J vaccine, they had the unfortunate happenstance to have young women or young ladies, some of them, about 600 out of, I think it was 20 million, have little clots in the venous drainage of their brains. That, again, is treatable. With few exceptions, a person would die from that. Now, we don't know who gets a vaccine that has a predisposing illness that nobody knew about. We call them in the clotting business procoagulant. That means you're likely to clot. I have people that I can put on stuff and they'll have a clot in their leg, and the next thing you know, they'll have a clot to their lung. Hopefully it'll be a small clot, but hey, it was unpredictable. Who knew why this happened? There are people now researching why certain people had major adverse reactions to the infection, number one, and number two, the vaccine. Now, let me give you an example. There was a guy a young guy who's 25 years old, who was a lacrosse champ. He got COVID and within 2 weeks was dead. This guy was in better shape than all of us put together. What about his immune system? We simply didn't know. All of this came so fast. There were so many tens of thousands of sick people in our ICUs and in the hospital. We had to make 3 or 4 new ICUs in the hospital, as they were doing in the South just recently. And so who had time to study his immunodeficiencies? We had time to put him in the body bag and take him to the morgue. Unfortunately, this was unexpected, and it reflects the individual nature of your immune response. So people respond in all different ways. The vast majority of people have no adverse reaction. Men do have worse reactions than women. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I actually had a gynecologist in New York call me up and said, do you think we should give men estrogens who are infected with the virus? I said, right. I think most men would rather die than take large doses of ethinyl estradiol, and with all the side effects of getting an estrogen. But nevertheless, that was the idea. We know there are differences in sex. We know, for example, that pregnant women, if they get the infection. Their immune systems are tamped down, and their immune systems are not likely to respond like that of a normal, healthy woman. And she may lose her baby, and she may die of COVID. It's fortunately very unusual and very not exceptionally rare, but it's uncommon. Let's put it that way. So we're advising that everybody who's pregnant or planning to be pregnant, make sure they get vaccinated.
Yeah, I think this is why this topic is so intriguing to me. And I like hearing people from all sides of the aisle, from every point of everything. I don't believe in one full truth ever. I like hearing from everybody and kind of bringing it in.
Sure.
But pregnant woman it's very interesting to me. So a pregnant woman can't drink alcohol, can't have certain types of foods, can't smoke. There's so many things they can't do because it could have an effect on the baby.
That's right.
But
it's a forever effect.
That came out less than a year ago, they now can have. Isn't it better they stay in isolation and try to maybe not be exposed to things that could affect the baby than introducing something
to
the infant? Because I know somebody who was pregnant, got the vaccine, was 6 months through, and lost the baby.
That probably had nothing to do with the vaccine. People lose babies all the time. I don't want to sound callous, but everybody these days who has anything happen to them, blame it on either COVID or the vaccine. Before we had people, it's an unfortunate thing, a terrible thing to lose a baby, but a lot of women do lose their babies. And it's an unfortunate thing that is due to other things like hypertension, diabetes. It's just possible. I have a chapter. I don't know what's going on out there. Somebody's at the doorbell. I hope my wife's answering. But, the kicker is this, that I have a chapter in the book about pregnancy and about the importance of pregnancy and your immune system during pregnancy. It's a vital time because everything the mother eats or drinks has an effect on the metabolism of the fetus vis-a-vis the placenta. And if they get drunk every night and they're pregnant, that's a bad thing. And so we don't want that to happen. So you've got to really understand that a pregnant woman is really and by the way, if she has a good immune system and she's been immunized, that baby carries the immunity over. The immunoglobulin is passed through the placenta to the baby, which after the baby is born persists. Her anti-COVID antibodies persist for several months.
Is this
so
kind
that's
of
a
like
good thing.
The Europeans who came over with the bubonic plague now have antibodies to that because it affected their family over 100 years or something, and then got carried through?
Yes, well, that's the immune recognition factor. The immune recognition is where your immune system recognizes an antigen, which could have been, you could have been exposed if you're 80 years old. You could have been exposed at the age of 10 to German measles, and your immune system will remember that. It's recognition. I used the term memory at one point, and one of my editors said, "Oh, no, you don't want to say memory. It kind of connotes that the brain is working in other parts of your body." Well, the brain is working in other parts of your body. And by the way, it depends on your brain.
Yeah.
Mind, body, soul. I have a whole section in the book on that.
I think this is a really good segue because I know we're running out of time, but I want to jump into this. Something you mentioned. You said everything has side effects.
Yes.
And I want to say there is one thing that I know boosts your immune system. I know doesn't have any negative side effects to it. And I think it's something wholeheartedly that everyone should be doing. And I actually am solely convinced that if this is the thing we worked on pre-COVID ever existing, COVID would not be a big deal right now. And that is our health. And that is exercise. If we took the understanding of, you mentioned comorbidities a lot.
Yes.
So if we didn't have those comorbidities, which mostly are preventable through diet and exercise, COVID would have been around. But I think they said 71%, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, I think it was around 71% of people that died from it had preventable diseases Being
Yes.
that they had type 2 diabetes, they had high blood pressure, which could have been
Right.
preventable if they took care of themselves better.
Right. So as a doctor, if you control your blood pressure, you watch what you eat, and most importantly, you exercise. Now, I talk a lot about that in another chapter where I talk about exercise, I talk about good nutrition, I talk about sexual activity, I talk about running and really increasing immune resistance by exercising. I myself run 3 miles every other day. I'm on the bicycle tonight. Right after I'm done here, I'm going to do a 5-mile bicycle trip in my gym here. I have a stationary bike, and you got to do it. So I put a movie in front of me. I play a Netflix movie or whatever, and I exercise. And I really feel good after that. But, a lot of people don't have the discipline to do that. And it's something that really you have to adapt. I've been doing it for 30, 40 years. So for me, it's not a thing. I used to run outside when it was warmer, and I broke my arm, I broke my foot. There are things you do to yourself because of that. But you're absolutely on target. My chapter on sexual relations, good vitamins, good diet, exercise daily if you can do it, even walking a mile. I tell a lot of my older patients, just walking, don't sit in a chair all day and watch TV. You can't do that. That's not good for your health. We were not made, our immune systems were not made to be stagnant. The immune system needs to be nurtured. It needs to be nourished. And that brings up the biome, but we don't have time for that. The biome is a really hot topic. The biome in your bowel, on your skin, in your lung, in your head, the biome. I have a whole chapter on that in the book, and that's really important. It's important to your vaccine as well.
Yeah, and I really wish you were on one of our earlier shows. It was like, I think a year ago to now, where we had a few episodes pinned to why when they close, I live in New York, as you've probably got the understanding from my accent, why they closed gyms the longest out of everybody and told people that fast food is going to stay open. You can get that whenever you want. Stay inside, don't move, don't go outside.
Yeah.
And, oh, by the way, gyms are super spreaders, so don't go there. We're going to close them for 7.5 months.
Right.
I feel like, I want your opinion. If you were running our state, would you have closed gyms or would you have promoted people to go exercise?
I would have promoted people to go exercise. I would never have closed gyms. I would say, you can run on a treadmill, or you can do the elliptical, or you can be on a bicycle, wear a mask. So big deal. You sweat. You don't want to share the yoga mat with somebody who's infected, but you got your own yoga mat, and just wash your hands. It's common sense, wash your hands, wear a mask, social distance. This was my mantra last year. Right now, you can still wash your hands. I go out to Starbucks. I have a spray in my car. When I come back to the car, I go, psh, psh, I spray my hands. I rub them together. I don't wear a mask because I now have the booster shot. I've been immunized 3 times for this virus. About to get the flu shot next week. You know what? And I feel pretty good about it. And I don't scream in other people's faces or cough on them or sneeze on them. And by the way, if you have a cold, get tested, because there is a big difference between COVID and a cold and COVID and the flu. But act like you have COVID until you get tested and proven negative, so you don't infect anybody else. But yeah, you're right. I wouldn't have closed the gyms, because people need to be active. You see what happened psychologically. It was a disaster. Young people were, the suicide rate went up. People were depressed. They still are depressed. There was a lot of neurotics that emanated from this isolation, this staying home. And
the obesity rate, the percentage of increase doubled.
Yeah, that's
Think
right.
about that.
It's horrible.
We were already going this way, and then it went this way.
Yeah, that's right. And it was all due to isolation. And that's why the kids had to go back to school. They really did, at whatever risk it was, because children, very rare that they get sick from COVID. Multi-system inflammatory syndrome, which is a specific syndrome, is so rare. We're seeing it at the university hospital, but we're a distillation of millions of people. So out of millions of people, you're bound to see a few cases in this hospital or that hospital in children. And again, it all goes back to your immunogenetics.
So my last question, because I know we went way over, I just really quickly want to touch on masks and all that because I see people doing them wrong all the time.
Yeah.
How does your immune system react when you're wearing the same mask for a week, sneezing into it, coughing into it, and then it's for someone like myself who suffers from allergies, which is an overactive immune system, so
Yeah.
it can be negative,
Yeah.
that this thing stuck to your face in no way, shape, or form can be good for you.
No, it's not good for you at all because it really probably reinfects you with the organism. You wear a mask for, say, more than 3 days without bleaching it and washing it. And if you can get a discardable paper mask, that's the best because we throw them away. I throw away one mask a day as a rule because when I see patients, I wear the mask all day long. And I wear gloves when I go in and see certain people, but not for everybody. I wash my hands before I see the patient and after I see the patient. And now it's a habit. If I go away from a patient, I didn't wash my hands, I feel bad. So I have to find a sink somewhere, anywhere. And that's what you have to get into. You got to get into that. And, you know, that's why colds are down. And I predict the flu season is going to be less than usual because we're so careful. People are very careful these days, at least the ones I know. And that's important. So wearing a mask, you really should change it. You can wear it. It prevents you from infecting somebody else, and more importantly, probably protects you from being infected by someone else who may be spitting or coughing or sneezing on you.
Yeah, and if you're in the car by yourself,
don't wear a mask.
Please stop.
I see that, and somebody told me that's a political comment, and I refuse to go there.
And the gloves, I'm sure you could talk about this. When you go to a store, you wear gloves, you touch everything, you go back to your car, you're still wearing the gloves, you touch your steering wheel, you touch your phone,
take the gloves off.
Your face. It's way worse.
Well, if you go to a supermarket now, they have these hand sanitizers at the door where you just make sure you don't touch your face when you're buying your guacamole. But when you come out, you can hit the hand sanitizer again. But wear a mask in the supermarket for sure, because the people that are in there, you don't know who's vaccinated, who's not. And I know the store operators are probably vaccinated, the produce people and the meat guy, the butcher and all that. But you don't know about and right now the supermarkets are mobbed. You go into a supermarket, it's pretty crowded.
Yeah, they were mobbed during the height of 2020 and gyms were closed.
Yes.
That one out.
That did not make any sense, really.
Definitely not. I'd just say last question. I think the best way to increase your immune system just to hop onto it, diet and exercise. It's been pushed out for however long they started looking into it. Every time I read up about how exercise helps someone, it's always something more positive. They had something every day about the benefits of it.
It's great.
How exposing yourself, because I remember as a kid, my mom's like, go play in dirt.
Yes. Oh, that's very important. I have that in the book too. The hygiene theory. You know, when children play in dirt, play in the cat box, eat mud, pick their nose, these are all good things for a child because they're enhancing their immune system. As gross as that seems and sounds, it's true.
Oh, no, it was, here's something dirty, but it's the goodness of our heart. Because she's like, I know I need to boost your immune system. And then you go to public school, and as every parent knows, the kid comes home sick every other day. And so eventually you start getting sick as an adult.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Any last words of wisdom throughout the whole thing? Dr. Bob, we went way over, but it's okay. I'm sure everyone kind of enjoyed this topic a little bit.
Yeah, this is a hot topic, and I'd be more than happy to come back, Anthony, and talk more. But most of what we talked about is in Immunity Strong, and there are things like the biomes, pregnancy, the hygiene theory, mind, body, soul, the spirituality of the immune system, the importance of meditation and yoga, boosting resistance. All of that's in there, and those are topics for the future.
Yeah, definitely, and I really want to get into autoimmune and
that's another
immune
cancer control and control of cancer, which is a big topic.
Yeah, there's so many.
So many things. I know, it's just overwhelming.
Just real quick, where can people find your book, get a hold of you, all that stuff?
Well, the book is not going to be out until I think either mid-December or early January. Costco, I am told, has made it a book for 2022, one of their selections. So it'll be available there. But you can pre-order it on Barnes & Noble now and Amazon now. Just use my last name, Lahita, and all of my books will pop out, including a couple of textbooks which you don't want to buy. They're like $300 a copy. They're good for libraries, but they're good for jacking your car up to change a flat. But they're not good for you to read unless you want to go to sleep early.
Yeah, fair enough. My brother wrote a medical textbook. I think I read a page. And thank you guys for joining us on this week's episode of Health and Fitness Redefined. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button and join us next week as we dive deeper into this ever-changing field. And remember, fitness is a journey, not a destination. Until next time.